So, howdy. This will be the first of a series of videos on voting theory. In this first video, we're just going to go over what the problem is that voting theory is trying to solve. And then in subsequent videos, we'll look at different kinds of voting methods and prospects for solving the problem of voting. So let's first just start out with what the problem of voting is. So if you're going to have any kind of voting problem, whether it's a political problem, election, maybe it's voting for your favorite movie that you're going to watch with your friends, you're trying to decide what film to watch, maybe it's voting for the best picture at the Oscars, you're a member of the Academy. Elections, voting problems happen all the time, and what they all have in common is they all involve a set of alternatives. Right? That is the things that we're trying to decide between, the candidates in an election, or the different possibilities that we might settle upon. So set A of alternatives. And then we have the individuals who take attitudes towards these alternatives or candidates. That's our set of voters, which we can call V, or the set of voters. And oftentimes I'll denote voters with like numbers, right? So we might have some set of voters, voter 1, voter 2, voter 3, so on, through voter n. I suppose there's a finite number of voters. And then for each voter, we're going to have their attitudes towards the set of alternatives. And those attitudes that the voters take, we're going to think of as preference rankings. So for each voter, we're going to imagine they take all of the alternatives, all of the candidates, and they can rank them from their favorite alternative down to their least favorite alternative. So we have really a set, and I'm going to call each one of these P for preference, P sub I, where I is in our set V of voters. Right? So for each individual voter, we're going to have a preference ranking over the set of alternatives. So for example, let's do an example here. We might have as our set of alternatives, right, the following. Maybe we're going to have a party at the end of class, at the end of the semester, and we're going to have to bring in some food to the party. And I could bring in, let's say, 3 possibilities that we could share together. I could bring in apples, I could bring in bananas, or I could bring in cherries. So those are our 3 alternatives. And then maybe the members, or the members of the class are our voters. So our set V could be, I believe we have 15 or 16 people in this class. I think it's 16 people. So 1, 2, 3, so on, down to 16. Right? And then for each one of the 16 members of the class, each one of the voters, there's going to be a ranking. So person 1, first person in the class, they're going to have some preferences among these. So maybe, and oftentimes I'll just write the preferences by sort of listing out all the alternatives from the best to the worst. So maybe person 1's preferences are that, apples are the best, cherries are second best, and then bananas is like the worst case, right? And then maybe person 2, their preferences are such that they actually think cherries are the best, and bananas are the second best, and apples are the worst, right? And so on, right, for person 3, all the way down to the 16th voter, right? Each individual voter, we're going to suppose, has a ranking like this. And then the task of voting theory is to take all of these, right, take some collection, right, we call this the problem of social choice. Social choice. The problem is to take all this collection of individual preferences, the first person's preferences, the second person's preferences, and so on, down on to the last of our n voters, and somehow amalgamate them, somehow combine them in order to determine what the social outcome should be. Right? And for now, later on, we'll think maybe about trying to generate an entire social preference ranking from a set of individual preference rankings. But for now, we can just think of the problem of social choice as taking individual preferences and then trying to generate some choice set. We call A star, which is a subset of our collection of alternatives A, right, that we call the choice set, right? Essentially, this is like the set of winning candidates, the set of acceptable candidates from our original set A of alternatives, right? And we can imagine all different kinds of ways of solving a problem of social choice, all different kinds of ways of taking a set of individual rankings, individual attitudes to alternatives or candidates, and then turning it into a choice set. And some of those might be more fair than others, some of those might seem more democratic than others. And in this class, we're going to be exploring different kinds of voting methods, and we'll be asking, are some of them more fair than others, or some of them more democratic than others? What does it mean for a voting method to be fair or to be democratic? Those are the kinds of things that we'll be exploring in this course. So in this video, I just wanted to set up sort of the problem of social choice. What are the ingredients in a voting problem? We have the alternatives, we have the voters, we have the attitudes of the voters, understood as their preferences. And then the problem is to take all that and turn those individual preferences into some single choice set. That's the set of acceptable alternatives. And we'll start talking about an initial method for doing that, probably the most obvious one people usually think of and use in a lot of real elections, and that's plurality vote. We'll talk about that in the next video. We'll talk about plurality vote, the distinction between plurality and pluralities and majorities. So that'll be our next video, and yeah, thanks for taking the course.